MGX Minerals is revolutionizing the new energy economy with patented lithium extraction technology, replacing traditional solar evaporation using low-cost, low-energy nanofiltration. The first system of this paradigm shift technology is currently being commissioned. MGX Minerals trades on the CSE, symbol XMG, the OTCQB, symbol MGXMF, and Frankfurt, symbol 1MG. For more information, visit our website, mgxminerals.com.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the Resource Works Society. Welcome back to the show, Stewart.
Thank you, Jim.
The Kinder Morgan pipeline, is it ever going to be built? And will customers in Asia finally give up on Canada if it isn't?
Well, I think it would be a catastrophe for the future of Canada if we're not able to bring in the income that pays for our medicines, our iPhones, our orange juice, all these things we can't make or grow ourselves. We have to import them somehow, and guess what? People always demand payment for them. We need money. We get it from crude oil. We've got to have that pipeline. That's what I hear from economists, from bankers, from senior politicians, people who know what's going on in finance.
Why was there a rally held at Jackpool Plaza in Vancouver last weekend?
Well, you know, that's a spot. If you stand there, you can watch the strength of Canada pass by in front of your eyes. The shipping through Vancouver's port, which is Canada's busiest port, it's on the way to Asia. It's trading goods. It's the grains. It's the forest products. It's the crude oil that goes through already today to different parts, mostly the States. That's what keeps Canada in the G7. It's what makes our quality of life the envy of the world, having a port like this. And, you know, I think the fact there's so many people, over 2 million people now living in the Lower Mainland, you've got these population pressures that weren't around when Vancouver was founded, and it makes it more and more challenging, the politics of building necessary infrastructure. Even though we do it safely, even though the shipping of, say, crude oil is safe in the same way that airline travel has gotten safe compared to the 1970s. I mean, you remember the 1970s? I grew up in the 1970s. I remember reading the paper pretty much every week. There'd be some airline or somewhere in the world crashing into a mountain or something horrible happening and hundreds of people dying. I don't know. What about these days, Jim? I don't think we see those headlines anymore because those things don't happen. The same is true of oil tankers. The technology, the double hulls, all of the professional practices, rules, regulations have changed just like in passenger aviation, so that no one I know ever gets on a plane thinking, oh, this could be bad. They just get on like they get on a bus. And it's the same with crude oil. Except for one thing, which is that in BC, we've got this particular thing. We have a kind of campaign to make people be afraid of something that isn't to be feared, and that is the safe shipping of crude oil across the water. And I've been studying those regulations in great depth over the last few weeks. I'm wanting to understand it because I know there's a lot of people concerned about it. So I've been schooling myself in it, and you know, the more you understand about it, the more you come to realize that we have got people doing this, technologies in place that make it safe, because it's happening all over the world safely too.
Aren't all the tankers off the West Coast double-hulled?
Yeah, not only that. If you have a picture, maybe it's a giant bathtub inside those double hulls, and that oil is just kind of sloshing around like a bathtub. It's not that way. There's probably 12 to 16 compartments inside there, so it doesn't do that. And also, if you can imagine a situation where maybe there is a collision and there is a problem and that tanker's in trouble, it's not just going to leak everything suddenly into the water around it. It is compartmentalized, and as serious as any incident is, it's not a catastrophic incident, and that's been the case around the world. We actually had a little quiz. We did a quiz on our Twitter feed. We said, how many large oil spills have there been in Canada in the last 10 years? Have there been more than 11? Have there been 6 to 10? Have there been 3 to 5? Or have there been less than 1? And most of the Canadian public, when they answer that question, they tend to say, well, there's probably been about 5 or 6 of those great big horrible oil spills in the last 10 years. Do you know what the actual answer is?
It's your quiz.
0. It's 0. And we try to work with people who are interested in these issues, and that's ResourceWorks, resourceworks.com. We provide information that's impartial, and we found that when we asked the same questions to people who follow our material, almost all of them, about 65%, very significant share, got it right. And the ones who got it wrong mostly said it was 1 to 2 spills. And that's because they're following the actual information. They're not listening to some of the doom and gloom where every passing tanker is a certain catastrophe just waiting to happen around the corner any moment, which is what you hear from some of the alarmist voices out there that seem, for whatever reasons, to be wanting to pump up those fears.
Well, I was going to say, with the price of oil these days, it's not worth it to have your tankers going down. Maybe back in the 70s they could afford it.
Well, that's a really good point. It's a valuable commodity. Why would you want to waste it from an economic point of view? And of course, wasting it would equate to catastrophic potential damage to sea creatures and shorelines, which is in nobody's interest. And I have discovered that, believe it or not, shipping companies don't want to have to pay billions of dollars in penalties and cleanup costs. Well, that's not surprising at all, actually. So they have these incredibly strict things, especially from Exxon Valdez. Back in 1989, way up in Alaska, there was a terrible accident. It's a famous thing. Most people have heard of it. And that was a change in practice. It marked a turning point for the industry. After that, the incidents of shipping, particularly oil tanker spills and crashes, declined dramatically, just as the safety of passenger aviation improved over the same period, because the public was just not going to put up with it anymore. And it's been true to this day that both of those things have been just reduced. Accidents have been reduced to practically nil.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after the break.
Glance Technologies owns and operates Glance Pay, a disruptive mobile payment technology now live in 16 cities in Canada and about to launch in the U.S. With revenues up 664% in the last quarter, Glance Technologies has the potential to be a worldwide leader in an industry projected to grow to $1.3 trillion in 3 years. Glance Technologies stock symbols are GLNFF in the U.S. and GET in Canada. Find out more at glancepay.com.
Hi, I'm Douglas Mason, President and CEO of Magnum Gold Corp. Inc., MGI on the TSX Venture Exchange. A 2015 drill program on the LH property intersected high-grade gold, including 16.9 meters of 13.58 grams and 11 meters of 20.66 grams per ton gold. A follow-up drill program is planned to further evaluate previously identified subsurface high-grade gold mineralization. Please visit our website at magnumgoldcorp.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Stewart Muir. Stewart, how much support is there in BC for the Kinder Morgan pipeline from Edmonton to what CTV called the tiny town of Burnaby on the national news? It's the third largest city in British Columbia, but according to CTV National News, it's the small city of Burnaby.
Yes, there we are. Good old Burnaby. Well, there was an Angus Reid Institute survey just a few months ago. It was released. They had a lot of questions. It was a very interesting survey. And one of them was, are you confident about the safety of marine shipping of petroleum products? So that would include crude oil. It could include LNG and things in Canadian waters. And the answer they got back from BC residents was that 52% were confident about the safety and 48% were worried about it. So that's pretty much what I would call a split. There's almost half people who think we can do it, and half people who think we can't. And there's, some who are more concerned or more confident, but, broadly it is split. And that's why when a bunch of groups got together, I started getting phone calls a few weeks ago. We're just a little group. We couldn't stage a big rally by ourselves. We don't have that ability. But I started getting phone calls from organizations in Vancouver and BC, some Albertans who are all over this stuff, they wanted to know if we were interested in doing something as well. And we all did. We all wanted to do something. So there are probably about half a dozen organizations. We pooled our little resources. We begged, borrowed some support to rent Jack Pool Plaza, which is kind of expensive. We had to buy an insurance policy. And we got some speakers. All of them volunteered to give their time, and other volunteers to organize it. And we wanted to get, we thought if we had 100 people, that would be successful, because we know that Rugby Sevens was on Saturday, and it looked like a beautiful ski day. Probably lots of people skiing. It was a beautiful sunny day. Lots of other things to do. We thought if we get 100 people out, we're going to be pleased with that. And as people started to arrive, we found the numbers climb. We got a couple hundred people. There was a police officer on the site who actually told us we had 500 people, and I think we probably had somewhere for sure in the middle. At the peak, we might have had 500, but we had quite a crowd there, and the speakers were amazing, all ages. We had a university student from UBC who used to be part of that divestment program that wants to get the university to divest from things in oil and gas and coal, but who's come to the idea that, wait a minute, we're transitioning to a cleaner society, but we still have these incredibly deep dependencies on things. We also had speakers who reflected on the fact that there's been a long history of American-backed environmentalist movements that are trying to create fear amongst Canadian residents about the things we need to do to have the quality of life we have. And, that's a topic of concern. That's Vivian Krause. A lot of journalists have written about her. Gary Mason in the Globe and Mail just wrote about her research and her ideas, and she came and brought that directly to a crowd there. They were very appreciative. We had some other young people speaking about their fears as a generation, being able to afford housing. How do you do it if the best part of the economy is driven out and sent to the States, because that's what's happening. Our oil and gas economy, by regulation, too much regulation, taxes are too high, it's actually being sent to the States, all the equipment and knowledge to do that. So very slowly we're coming around to a place where Canada will have to buy its energy from other countries. We're going to see a reduction in our quality of life. We'll be importing some of our energy the way the carbon tax regime is going. And you know what? None of it will do anything to improve the climate globally if we go down that course. Now, we don't have to go down that course, and that's, I think, a point that a lot of people were making.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after this.
Hi, I'm Douglas Mason, President and CEO of Rainy Mountain Royalty Corp., RMO, on the TSX Venture Exchange. Rainy Mountain's Brunswick property is located in the Rideout Shear Zone in Ontario, with grab samples running as high as 32 grams per ton gold. A follow-up drill program to test numerous targets located by recent groundwork is planned for early 2018. Please visit our website at rmroyalty.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're chatting with Stewart Muir. Stewart, how far away did some of the people come for the pro-pipeline rally?
Well, we didn't know what to expect, but what we discovered on Saturday afternoon as people started to arrive, there was a gentleman. He came from Fort Nelson. He drove down. That's about as long a drive as you can do in BC. If you get the map out and you put your hand on the top right-hand corner of the map of BC and look around, you'll see Fort Nelson there. It's pretty close to the corner that touches Alberta and Yukon, way, way up there in the north part of the Peace River country. And he drove down from there. Up there, there's a lot of forestry. There's a lot of natural gas up there. It's kind of quiet right now because the economy has slowed down in that part of the country. But Ian Fife, he did this on his own dime out of his concerns. He's someone who speaks eloquently of the hardships that people are going through there. So he got down, he spent a few hours with us, and then because he had to get back to his job, he had to jump back in his truck and drive home. It was an epic journey. We had a bus, about 25 people came from Alberta to join our rally. Otherwise, it was largely local people from Vancouver. But this group, they drove overnight. They had a bus that started in Red Deer, got a few people there. They drove down to Calgary, and then they drove across the Rockies here. And it was, I think, quite a night. They jumped out of the bus. They came in. They were fantastic audience members. There was one who sang "O Canada" to open the rally. It was a great performance. Actually, if you go to resourceworks.com, you can see that. You can hear the opening anthem that was given. And then afterwards, they had to get back to work too, and they jumped on the bus and drove through the night. 2 nights consecutively that they spent on the bus so they could bring a message to here. I think when people do that voluntarily, these aren't fat cats flying in from Calgary to do this. These are people who don't have a lot of spare money, but they have a lot of passion. They're willing to do that. I think we should be mindful of what that signifies.
Did any big oil corporations kick in?
No, we didn't have any support from big oil corporations. It would be, I think they have other interests, and we don't want to have a company kick in for that, because I think it's more important that we have these volunteers who do that work. It's not often the impetus comes together to do this, but in this case, it was just the right moment, and I think a lot of people were aware that there was another event going on the other side of town. There were a lot of people coming in from the States who were talking about a standing rock. They want to see a standing rock in Canada, which is that thing in Dakota where there was a protest. It was pretty ugly. And, I'm not sure it's a good idea that we have Americans coming in to try to encourage that kind of thing in our country. We're independent of the U.S. still. And for the funding and the personnel to come into Canada to do these things. I know there's a lot of Canadian people who went to that too, but when you know that the messaging and the money for that is mostly foreign, I think a lot of people are starting to get tired of that and starting to say, how can we take back these issues for Canadians to benefit us? Because right now, the industry is migrating to the south. The low taxes that Trump has brought in, the regulations that encourage oil and gas development, they're taking our industry away. And I know there's some people who say, well, that's fantastic. I'm glad they're doing that. It's actually not so good because we use oil and gas in all kinds of ways every day. Everybody does. There's no one who doesn't. I don't care what they tell you. They do. Everyone rely on it in so many ways. So we have to have a responsible approach to it. And it's just no good handing it over to the Americans, because we can do it ourselves and actually do it better for the environment.
Does BC get any economic benefit from the expanded pipeline?
Well, I would say it gets economic benefit at 3 levels. First of all, there's about $2 billion in paychecks that British Columbia residents earn because they go to work at job sites in Alberta. They work there a week or 2 weeks or whatever it might be at the camp or wherever it is in the town, and then they come home and their family's at home. Maybe it's Campbell River or Surrey. Everyone, I think, knows someone like that. That's one way. A second way it will benefit is when this $7 billion piece of infrastructure is constructed in Canada, and that in BC, most of it. And, that's a short-term thing. And I know a lot of people say, oh, a big deal. Well, how many other $7 billion projects do we have coming in? I don't know of another one personally. And then the third way it benefits is that it creates all these taxes and royalties for government, which we use as a country to make sure we have a Navy and an Air Force to defend us, first of all. It allows our federal government to have a democratic parliament in Ottawa, so we're all represented there, and our 300-plus MPs can, go back to their ridings and hear what people want to say, and then go back to Ottawa with that information to share it in our democracy. Someone's got to pay for that. All those airfares, all those hotel rooms, you think that's free? We have to pay for Canada. And then the other thing as well, it's actually a fourth thing, which is the real meat and bones of it is that the oil and gas industry creates the export earnings that let us buy things we need, because we import all these cars. If you're seeing German cars on the road or Japanese cars, there's lots of them. How do you think we pay for those? We have to sell something else to pay for those. Same with orange juice down at the supermarket. Same with the iPhone. We don't make those things. We have to pay for them. And then having exports lets us do that. So I've just given you 4 ways that having this as a domestic industry is beneficial.
Retiring Saskatchewan Premier Brad Wall says Canada's national energy policies are discouraging investment in Canada. Is he right?
Oh, absolutely. The giant sucking sound, as one headline writer in Alberta put it a few days ago, that we're hearing right now is the sound of Texas attracting the equipment that we use, the drilling rigs, that kind of thing from Alberta. It's just sucking them down to Texas, where they have a better business environment, they have better regulations. They actually put a welcome mat out here. Look what happens when someone wants to invest in energy in Canada today. You have all these people lining up, including governments, to say, we don't want you, get out of here. And, oh, by the way, we're going to let you spend a few $1 billion to go through our processes and get our permits, and then we're going to tell you to get out of here. And do you know what? The world is not stupid. They are waking up to this. We have a reputation as a country as, I'm going to say, I'm a pretty mild-mannered guy, Jim, but I'm going to say we are getting a reputation as jokers in this field of investment, and it doesn't do us any good as a country. If there are some people who think, oh, that's good, we don't want that investment, you just wait what happens when it starts to affect the hospital services that you think are just there for you. Someone's got to pay for that, and it's going to have an impact. It really does. Economists are the kind of early warning system we have to warn us about that. And you talk to economists right now, oh, they're worried.
Isn't Alberta spending $1 billion to upgrade the bitumen into something that's easier to ship?
Yep, they're nimble. They're taking the many grades. I mean, it's not that they produce just one thing and put on the shelf out there. I mean, it's a diverse store they have full of all kinds of different energy projects, if you like the analogy. And you have propane and butane from natural gas. You've got light oil. You've got the heavy oil. All of them have different markets, different needs, different distribution structures and customers. And the more you can diversify your product line, the more things you can have on the shelf when the customer comes in to shop from you, the more you can offer there. And so it totally makes sense to have upgraders in place there to do that function.
Now, bitumen, they make out you're trying to ship pavement through a pipeline, so it will never work. Is that true?
Well, the Dilbit, which is the thing that people talk about, the new pipeline coming to the West Coast, is functionally like any other crude oil. And I know there's been a very expensive propaganda campaign run out of Madison Avenue by some of these American groups to convince Canadians that they have this horrible Dilbit, bitumen, horrible thing that is just going to sink in the water, and it isn't that way at all. And recently we've seen some scientists talking about it more, sharing their experiments, because there is ongoing research into spill safety and what happens if there is a spill, what happens with this kind of oil, that kind. And it's actually easier to clean up than other kinds of oil. This is what they found. It's surprising, I know. And this sort of vilification of Dilbit is not based on facts.
Stewart, anything else you wanted to add today?
Well, I think, for everyone who's got questions about this, and I think that's pretty much everything, one thing I've found is that there's a gaping hole out there. I think what we need is to have some attempt to reduce the complexity, the barriers to understanding, because everyone is smart. People figure out their mortgage payments. They figure out how to get their winning lottery combination that they play. They figure out how to, provide for their children. Everyone is, when they're pressed into a situation where they have to do something, we're pretty good at figuring things out. And right now I think figuring out how to get to a better place, more confidence about our regulations, our practices, our technology for safely shipping crude oil through Vancouver to market is a really important thing. And I'm doing a little bit of work there because I'd like to understand it. The thing I've discovered is there's thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of reports and technical things. It's often in technical language. It's difficult to understand. So what I'm doing is I'm talking to some experts to see if we can find a way to break that down, make sure it's still factual, but more understandable, more accessible, so that other people can have the same experience of developing knowledge and subsequently confidence in what's there. Because the experts I talk to are very confident. And you wonder, well, why is that? Is that just because they're brainwashed? Well, no, it's because they have knowledge about things, and they are professionally equipped to understand it. So I'm wishing in 2018 that more people can be helped to have that understanding if they want to invest a little bit of time in it.
Stewart, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
My guest has been Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the ResourceWorks Society. His website, resourceworks.com. You're listening to HowStreet.com radio. Find us on Twitter at HowStreet. Our very popular YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Questions for the show or our guests can be sent to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.